Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session on content capture and data visibility. Our presenters today are Sam Elbeck, Senior Director of Sales and Business Development for Digital Compliance, and Chris Stapenhurst, America's Practice Manager for Digital Compliance. They'll be joining us live for Q&A after our session ends, so make sure to submit your questions, and we'll be ready to go. Enjoy the session.
Thank you for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Sam Elbeck, and today we're going to talk about content capture, data insight, and the overall Veritas Insights portfolio. In addition to that, we're going to touch on the recent acquisition of Globanet and how that fits into our portfolio. And I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Chris Stapenhurst, who's going to talk about data insight in detail and how that adds a lot of value to compliance. So to start with, when we look at the digital compliance portfolio, we look at it in terms of three pillars. The first pillar is visibility, understanding your data, where it's located, how to access it. The second pillar is context. Once you know where that data is, you want to pull that data in. You want to index it, make sure that the metadata is enriched, and capture it and put it in a location that suits your organizational needs around worm storage and compliance storage. And the third pillar is action. The ability to take action against that data is always something of extreme importance for organizations. So once it's captured, you want to supervise that data. You'd like to discover against that data. You want to be able to manage that data from the moment it hit your environment to the moment it's set to leave your environment. When we talk about visibility, the two products that fit into that are Data Insight and Merge One. And that is really going to be the focus of today's discussion. When you talk about context, Enterprise Vault, I know many of you use Enterprise Vault today or Enterprise Vault.cloud. So Enterprise Vault is the solution that can add metadata to the data coming in, can store the data accurately in any storage location that makes sense, maybe cloud or on-prem, and is able to index that data in a way that makes it very easy to take action against. And finally, in terms of actionability, we look at it from two perspectives. Supervision, which is proactive in nature, and you want to supervise data that it's coming in. And then you look at it from a discovery standpoint, which is reactive, as data needs to be made available. And as you need to capture that data, the ability to do so in a quick and reactive and an ad hoc manner is there. Now, all of this has our classifier around it. So as data is coming in, you can classify it. If it has social security numbers or PII data and it needs to be classified in a certain way. If it's HIPAA data and needs to get a certain amount of years in storage, you can classify it in that way. So the classification engine is across all our products and allows you to classify data exactly the way you want it once it's stored. So this is our overall compliance portfolio, our vision for our product, and what is used by many of our customers. Now let's jump into how Globanet fits in and the Globanet solutions. Earlier this year, Veritas acquired Globanet. While the acquisition happened this year, they have been partners for approximately 20 years, and the Globanet has been a leader in data capture and migrations for a very long time. We've got many joint customers utilizing our solution set, hundreds of them, and we're going to talk about how they're utilizing it today and where it can provide value in general for all our customers. When you look at Merge One, it's all about data capture. Organizations wishing to have a unified environment and platform to capture data from almost any source and any social media platform utilize Merge One today. We're fortunate to have many large financials and many insurance companies, manufacturing companies across multiple industries utilizing Merge One to control their data, to help with IP leakage and also with compliance requirements and the ability to supervise that data as it's coming in. If you look, you'll see our different data sources that we have. We divide these into categories. The top left-hand side, you'll see collaboration. Collaboration is all about communication across peers, across different organizations. So things like MS Teams, Yammer, Zoom data, Cisco WebEx Teams. We've got a slew of the most popular collaboration mechanisms, and we want to capture that to make sure our customers are covered. If you look at the middle where it says document collaboration, that's all about the ability to capture file system data as it's moving from on-prem to the cloud. So data in Box, Dropbox, Citrix Share and one of our newest additions, AWS S3, we're also able to capture data from there. On the right-hand side is where it all started when it comes to compliance, is Bloomberg, messaging, Symphony, all the messaging platforms utilized by broker-dealers is what we capture on the top right. That gives our customers the peace of mind that data, that communication across the broker-dealers is captured on a regular basis. If you look at the bottom left-hand side, you'll see mobile and text. As more and more needs around capturing that data becomes prevalent, we're able to capture it. And enterprise tools, web page, public web pages, ServiceNow, another recent addition, we also capture that type of data. And finally, a very exciting portion of Merge One that many of our customers take advantage of is what we have under Other. So many organizations tend to have home-built solutions for communication that their traders utilize or their internal resources utilize, or a way to broadcast messages across the entire organization. So we can build custom templates if that data could be exported to EML or text delimited or XML, or if that data is in a database like SQL or Oracle. So that is also something that we cover for our customers, and this gives you a view of all the different sources we tend to go after. And you'll see this is a platform. We add connectors on a regular basis. We go to market with 80 today, but we expect to have 120 by the end of 2021. So to put this into perspective, for our customers that have Enterprise Vault or Enterprise Vault Cloud, or if you're looking for an archive solution, this gives you a good idea of how the flow happens. Enterprise Vault or Enterprise Vault.cloud can capture data from email, from NSF PSTs off of clients, and from file systems. And that is your location for your unstructured data. Then you've got Data Insight, which Chris will touch on in a lot more detail. But Data Insight can surgically pull data from infrastructure on-prem, in the cloud, in your cloud-based infrastructure as well. So wherever the data may be, Data Insight can call it and then send that data into Enterprise Vault. So now EV or EV Cloud has become this location for all this data, and Merge One layers right on top of it. With the layering of Merge One on top of it, you have 80 different sources you can now capture from. So the discovery process becomes very powerful. You've got our EDP solution or Veritas Advanced Supervision. For those of you that use Compliance Accelerator or Discovery Accelerator, C or DA, you can now from a single search discover against Sam and Chris's email data, what we've been talking about on Zoom, what we've been chatting about on MS Teams, what we're talking about on Bloomberg and Symphony from a single search, and give you a full view of how that conversation looks across the continuum of your unstructured data. So this goes a long way with our customer base. And with Merge One now part of the Veritas portfolio, it adds a much needed location for all the different data sets that could come into EV or EV Cloud. So this is more of a supervision and a proactive use case. If you look at it from a reactive use case and you're using EDP today, or you're looking at a solution to be able to utilize for e-discovery, EDP in its current form can capture data from Office 365, and it's inherently from email, from clients, from Enterprise Vault if you have an archive, and from file system archives. Data Insight adds again that layer of surgical type analysis of the environment and can send it to EDP. So now EDP, you have a case that's open, you can discover against all these locations, but a gap that's always been there is how do you discover against all the different social media platforms? Again, Merge One layers on top of it, and now you can collect data during the discovery process from the 80 different sources we're talking about. Makes it simple, smooth, and very quick to be able to go and capture against that data that you need. Now, the next product that I'm going to touch on right now is another solution that came over with the Globant acquisition, and that is called Migrate. And going forward, it'll be referred to as Veritas Migrate, and it's all about understanding where all your archives are and being able to move them across multiple archives if required. So if a company gets acquired and they have an archive, or different departments have been using different archives, you can consolidate all that into a single archive to make it very easy to know where your data is, how your data is stored, and to take control of your data a lot more seamlessly. And one of the areas that we want to focus on is the ability to move data from on-prem to the cloud. Many of our customers are starting to look for a cloud-based archive, and that's where EV Cloud comes into play. We've had EV Cloud for many years. We've got thousands of customers utilizing it. But in more recent days, you're starting to look at how can I move, I have a cloud initiative. How can I move my enterprise vault archive on-prem to ev.cloud? Veritas Migrate is what's going to be able to do that. It's a low-risk migration because we've been doing it for 15 plus years. We have the ability to pull that data out quickly and seamlessly. And one of the inhibitors of moving from on-prem archive to a cloud tends to be cost. With Migrate now being under the Veritas umbrella, we're looking to make that cost much more affordable, or in some cases, completely at no cost. And when we look at the zero learning curve, when you go from EV on-prem to EV cloud, we have for years been unifying the actionability of that. So if you're doing e-discovery for EV on-prem, you'll now use the same solution to do e-discovery for EV cloud. If you're doing supervision with EV on-prem, you'll use that same solution for supervision in EV cloud. So imagine the archive becomes a virtual archive, and it allows you to be able to, doesn't matter where your data is stored, some may be on-prem, some in the cloud, you'll be able to discover against that data in a very seamless manner. So a quick use case that I'll go over before I pass it over to Chris to talk about data insight. One of our large financials, they had multiple solutions to capture different content sources. They were using one archive for Bloomberg. They were using another archive for MS Teams and Yammer and Chatter. They were using another archive for Skype. They had a hybrid environment where some of their mailboxes were on-prem and some of them were in Office 365. And they needed to capture MS Teams one-on-one hybrid mode, which was unavailable at the time. And then they wanted to be able to supervise and do discovery against all that. How we helped was we consolidated all the different capture solutions with Merge One. Now, instead of having a solution for Bloomberg and MS Teams and Skype and Chatter and Yammer, we now had a solution that can capture all of them and unify them and send them into an archive. And that was Enterprise Vault. So we also migrated the historical data from multiple archives and put that into EV as well. So now one solution to capture all the different data sources, one solution for all the archives. And the customer also asked us, in 12 months, we've been looking at potentially moving to the cloud so we can get our infrastructure off-prem. So we put Migrate in front of them so they know that if you ever want to go from EV on-prem to EV Cloud, we will be able to do that for you with GlobalNet Migrate, with Veritas Migrate. And finally, from a supervision standpoint, our supervision solution, as mentioned, is unified. They'll be able to do supervision, reactive discovery, all from that single location. So the customer ended up with a single organization and portfolio of products from Veritas that's able to meet all their compliance and supervision and e-discovery needs. And finally, when we look at roadmap, where are we going with our portfolio? We're investing heavily into it. That's one of the reasons we acquired GlobalNet, is to make sure that we've got all the content sources covered. We've got constant new connectors coming out. We deployed 5 this quarter alone. Native review. When you look at capturing and reviewing email, you have your to, you have your from, you have your data content. But when you look at chat messages from MS Teams or Skype, the data is a little bit different. So we are going to allow, with the of how Merge One captures data, the ability to view Slack data or MS Teams data as if you're in Slack when you're doing review. That's what we call native review. And we already have some of those features built in to Merge One. So we're going to be adding it and integrating it further with EV Cloud and EDP. When we look at collections at source, many times some of our customers using our products like EDP or Discovery Accelerator want to be able to immediately go out and collect data from Slack, for example. So more of that integration will be taking place in the coming months. And finally, the seamless migration will continue to be a big part of our solution set and how we go to market, because we want to make sure our customers are really putting the data where they want. They want it on-prem, they want it in the cloud. We want to be there to do the migration seamlessly. So there's a lot of exciting things going on. Please reach out if you saw anything here that you would like to dig into a little bit deeper. Each one of these could take some time just to go over with you, so feel free to reach out. And with that, I'll pass it to Chris Staphenhurst to take us through data insight.
Today, data insight. Now, a problem for most organizations is the complexity of true information management. We all know that data is growing and that data is, well, everywhere. And these two phenomena are actually behind the evolution of all these new regulations that we're seeing and in the new security threats that are now forcing us to have to manage our data better. Unfortunately, this complexity often leads to analysis paralysis, especially when it comes to things like unstructured information. This occurs because you're not able to kind of fundamentally answer basic questions about our data. Questions like, what data do I have? How much is that data costing me truly? And where is the risk of that information to my organization? And perhaps even more importantly, where within my data estate does that risk exist? The inability to answer these fundamental questions is what drives customers to look at data insight. You see, data insight can actually answer those questions. It leverages what's known as multidimensional visibility to empower organizations to treat their data via policy, via technology, and via automation. And it does that by looking at the different dimensions that exist within your information. It looks at the dimension of metadata, for example, to tell you how old your data is. It looks at the dimension of content to tell you that there's a credit card inside of this file or personal data inside of that file. It looks at who can access my data, so the dimension of permissions, right? A sensitive file located in a secure location is not a risk. In fact, it's perfectly normal. But you take that file and you dump it into an open share where everyone can access it, and all of a sudden it does become a risk. It needs to be treated, and it should be classified differently. Another really interesting dimension is that of user activity. In fact, this is a vital dimension when it comes to classification. Data insight records every activity done against that file, every read, every write, every delete, permission changes. This tells us who is actually using the data, how the data is actually being used, who owns the data, and perhaps most importantly, who may be impacted should we treat that data with a particular remediation action. Say we want to encrypt it or migrate it or tier it. What kind of business process might we break if we don't do this properly? And so this dimension is perhaps the most important one that helps organizations move away from that analysis paralysis. But beyond user activity, we look at other dimensions as well. We can capture sort of like the business context from repositories such as Active Directory. And data insight takes all of these different dimensions to your data, provides you with the ability to overlay AI and analytics over the top to empower you to be able to actually do something with your information. And so how does this work? Well, data insight gets dropped into your environment, and essentially it goes out and scans to deliver intelligence against your unstructured data, both on-premise and in cloud. And it integrates to also capture sources of information that you might get from something like semantic data loss prevention. It can even capture sources of information directly from your end users as well through our self-service portal. With the self-service portal, end users log into the portal and they can attest to yes or no questions. Things like, is this file classified properly? Or does my share have the right level of permissions? It takes all of this information and then it can trigger actions. Actions that can be triggered directly through the data insight application itself or through integration with our tools like Enterprise Vault or eDiscovery platform to perform discrete, specific actions against our data. Things like archive, collect for eDiscovery, expire or delete. Lastly, all of this information can be mined for intelligence and reporting capabilities, either natively through data insight or again, through integration with reporting engines such as Power BI or Aptar, where all of the dimensions of data that data insight captures can now be potentially correlated against other sources of information that exist within your organization. And this can be used to help solve bigger problems. And so what do clients do with all of this information and actionability that data insight actually provides them? Well, it's kind of interesting. Data insight is sort of like a Swiss Army knife. Data insight helps our clients do a great many things. Overall, we try to group them into three broad categories of use cases, if you will. And so that first category of use cases that we see customers using data insight for is around storage management to help reduce costs, right? And not just storage costs, but management costs, so total costs of ownership, right? I think organizations are beginning to realize that even if the storage is free, they know that managing data actually costs money. And so data insight provides an opportunity to optimize this. Beyond that, data insight is also used to reduce risk throughout your organization through the detection of anomalous activity and behavior of both end users and of data, tracking things like ransomware and data loss events and malicious intent and malicious users. And the third bucket is all around compliance. Data insight can be used to do things and deliver on things like entitlement reviews and permissions reporting. It could also be used for dealing with protected and sensitive data to help with regulations around things like HIPAA, GDPR, or SOX. And so essentially, data insight enables you to stop treating your data as a single big blob because you don't really understand what you have and you don't really know what to do with it. Unfortunately, that's far too typical. And so what data insight does is it answers these questions that provides you with the content and context that you need to actually make intelligent decisions about your data. It then enables you to actually trigger action to do things like move regulated content to warm storage, or securely and effectively capture content for e-discovery. You may want to trigger a security action such as encryption, or delete or sunset information that's expired by policy. Or lastly, you may be interested in perhaps empowering your organization to prioritize and migrate only the right data to cloud, or anywhere else you may choose to move that data, reducing time, risk, and expenses of treating the data after you've moved it. And so as you can see, data insight is actually really powerful and can do a great many things. But what else can you do with data insight? And where is data insight going in terms of its future and its roadmap? And so this is a part where I get really excited, is around the data insight roadmap. I don't have enough time to talk about everything that data insight's going to do, but I'm going to talk about three things that are kind of near and dear to my heart in terms of the direction that data insight is going. The first of those is around the integration with Power BI. This provides a visually stunning and dynamic reporting capability to view and interact with all of your data. It provides a new way for you to be able to consume your data from data insight, as reports and views can be subscribed to, much like a web page or YouTube account or news alert. It can also be used to integrate into existing Power BI frameworks that you may already have within your organization. And this allows you to merge existing workflows and data that you might already have to help solve bigger problems when you add all these additional vectors of information that you're capturing from data insight. There's a lot more I think we can do with Power BI. I'm really excited about this feature, and I hope that you are too. And you know what's actually also really, really cool about this integration? It's the fact that the mechanism that we've used to integrate both data insight and Power BI together was also used to integrate data insight and Aptar together. So Aptar is our infrastructure and backup analytics and visibility tool. And so by merging data insight, data analytics with Aptar infrastructure analytics together, we could now solve much bigger problems comprehensively by delivering end-to-end visibility. And what I mean by end-to-end visibility, I'm talking about from the spindle or the LUN straight up to the backup tape and inside the file to read that credit card number that you may have stored in the cloud somewhere. And so this allows you to effectively deal with things like ransomware, like protected or sensitive data. And it effectively allows you to address really difficult challenges that exist within the information management world. Things like being able to deliver on data sovereignty, being able to deliver on privacy requirements, or being able to better and more easily address your SOX audit concerns, right? All of that becomes much, much easier to do when you've got this end-to-end visibility at your fingertips. And while we're just working through this initial integration with Aptar, I could tell you that we've actually proven this out both in the labs and within customer environments as well. And so here's an example of what that looks like. You're currently looking at classified data from data insight that's visualized inside of Aptar. And so for this example, we want to focus on classified data that's been classified as ransomware. And what we want to do is we want to associate this data to data that exists within our backups. We want to associate the host names, the folder location, make sure it's not in the exclusion list of your backup data. And we want to be able to see what we can do with that. Well, that's really powerful when we're merging these two pieces of information together. Just imagine what we can do with this data, tracking and identifying a particular ransomware file on primary storage to its location within the backup, identifying even which backup tapes contain this ransomware file. And perhaps even more importantly, this information tied together can help us locate the last known good original file before it's been infection. And so Data Insight and Aptar contains all of the data you need to be able to deal with problems like ransomware. This is an exciting direction for us in terms of visibility, and I hope that you agree with us. In fact, we'd love to hear from you and get your perspective as to what you think of this integration, because this is something we truly want to continue to develop. And then lastly, again, another story around integration in the data insight roadmap. We're currently solutioning for deeper and more impactful integration with Microsoft 365. We also want to integrate with information protection to integrate with features such as sensitivity labels, the ability to turn on and off encryption and decryption, actionability with certain tasks like migrations, and the ability to manage information both inside and outside of Microsoft's domain, driving actions using their framework or our framework, or maybe a combination of the two. And so this is another area that gets me really excited about where data insight can go, because I think it could truly deliver a lot of value to both Microsoft customers, Veritas customers, and I'm looking forward to it greatly. And so bringing all of this session together, we're talking about our digital compliance solutions. It all starts with visibility into your data with data insight and into your infrastructure with Aptar. It's also about the ability to get at communications and collaboration information, leveraging Merge One. You need to know what you've got before you can plan for remediation. Starting at that place of knowing and understanding what you've got in terms of your data set makes all downstream activities much more easier to deal with, right? And what kind of downstream activities are we talking about? Well, if we stick to the digital compliance portfolio, we could talk about downstream activities such as lifecycle and retention management with Enterprise Vault. Controlling your data from cradle to grave, while at the same time indexing and surfacing your information to make it easier to perform things like end-to-end e-discovery and supervision compliance through tools like the e-discovery platform and Veritas Advanced Supervision. Now, all of these technologies are not only integrated together in multiple ways, but they're also backstopped by a common classification engine capable of classifying over 900 patterns and policies right out of the box. Things like credit card data, personal data, and even our new COVID-19 classification policy. Our classification engine is not only industry leading in terms of the wide range of policies that we can provide and its overall accuracy, but also because of its highly customizable nature and the ability to use classification across our portfolio. So as you can see, we here at Veritas, we've been very busy focusing on integrating our solutions together to help solve the most complex information management tasks and challenges that you have within your organization. And we plan to continue to focus on integration to help solve those big challenges for you. And so this ends our quick little session today. I do hope that you found it impactful. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. Sam and I, we're going to be sticking around to answer any questions you might have, and we'd love to hear from you. And we also want to thank you for your participation. And we look forward to engaging with you during the conference. And with that, let's open it up to questions and answers.
Awesome, great session, guys. I'd like to introduce our experts today, Sam Elbeck, our Senior Director of Sales and Business Development, Sam, and then Chris Stapenhurst, our America's Practice Manager for Digital Compliance as well. So we've got a lot of great questions with only about 5 minutes left, so we're gonna try to hit all of these as soon or as quick as possible. So first one for Chris. If a customer is using the discovery tools in Office 365 E5, can you create a discovery set that can be made available to Office 365 Discovery?
Yeah, absolutely. Right out of the box with Merge One, we can deliver that capability to integrate directly into Office 365. And depending on the content sources, we may potentially also want to think about leveraging data insight. So the answer is a resounding yes. Thank you, Victor.
We have one from Brian Bell. Do we have a connector for Salesforce? I'll let you handle that one, Sam.
Sure. Hey, Brian. Yeah, we do have a connector for Salesforce, Salesforce Chatter, and we're also investigating deeper Salesforce integration with some other parts of the CRM as well. But available immediately is Chatter, and many of our customers utilize that to capture the discussions going on in Salesforce and store them and archive them.
Perfect. Here's a part two from Bryant as well. This is for Chris. Can data insight combine structured, semi-structured, and unstructured related data?
So data insight can capture structured and semi-structured, and that comes down to the unstructured and semi-structured. forgive me, depending on your definition of each, right? So we would consider SharePoint a semi-structured content source. When it comes to coordinating them with structured data sources, that's where integration through reporting platforms such as Aptar or Power BI could come into play potentially. But at the moment, we don't currently have a structured data set that is compatible directly with data insight.
Gotcha. Thanks, Chris. This one's for Sam. Sam, if we want to capture MS Teams, I've read most capture platforms cannot capture edits or deletes. Does Merge One have the same limitation, or can Merge One do this?
A great question. Actually, Merge One can do that. We were the first platform to work with Microsoft to capture MS Teams, and we identified that issue early on where if you're trying to capture edits and deletes, you can't. So we integrated with their webhooks APIs to allow us to do so. And our relationship with Microsoft's really tight. If you saw during the keynotes, we had 2 speakers from Microsoft, and that just shows how closely we integrate with them, and we can capture edits and deletes. And one other thing to the person who asked the question that we typically get asked with that is, can you capture one-on-one chats when you're in hybrid mode? So you've got some folks that are still on Exchange on-prem, some folks that are on Office 365, and the answer again is yes, we can capture one-on-one private chats within hybrid mode as well. So we're very well in tune with MS Teams and have a great connector into that platform.
Perfect, thanks, Sam. Here's a question for either of you from Juha. Do we have a updated comparison chart for EV and EDP versus Microsoft E5 discovery capabilities?
Well, we've got a great website that I would potentially direct you to. So that would be Microsoft.com/solutions/Office 365. I will put the link in the chat here in just a couple minutes.
Perfect, thank you. Here is another question. I'm going to go with you, Chris. Doing a proactive search in, for instance, Office 365, can you add that to a DA case as a separate search?
I think I would need a little bit more context around that question. But if we're leveraging Discovery Accelerator, if that's what you mean by DA, that currently has the capability of searching within the archive. So if we're looking to search within Office 365 content, it needs to have access to it through the archive. That can be achieved through Merge One, right? The other way that you could potentially get there would be if you have the eDiscovery platform, which reaches out directly to Office 365. So there is ways to get there. It depends on the context of your question, but good question nonetheless, Victor. Thanks.
Perfect. Here's one for you, Chris, as well. Data insight, data insight integration with Enterprise Vault, is that content aware?
Yes, it is. So data insight, one of the dimensions that it can capture is content through our classification engine, right? The same classification engine that we backstop with an Enterprise Vault. So you can use data insight sort of as your sentry. Tell me what's out there. Tell me what's in my environment from a metadata and from a content perspective as well. Use that intelligence to then leverage Enterprise Vault for action. So absolutely, yes.
So part 2 of that, which I think you answered, was data insight finds, could it find anything on SharePoint, archive to SharePoint archive, or only on file server archiving as the target?
Again, I would like to have a little bit more context around that question. And so if I'm not properly addressing your question, please reach out to me directly. I'd be glad to make sure I properly answer it. But data insight can basically scan SharePoint as well as file servers. It's got the native ability to automatically archive from file servers to Enterprise Vault. But for SharePoint, we would need to leverage another mechanism to get that content into Enterprise Vault, possibly Merge One.
Gotcha. Thanks, Chris. And I think we have time for one last question for Sam. Sam, if we're looking to move, the question is, if we're looking to move it to ev.cloud, can you clarify how we can take advantage of the seamless migration from EV on-prem into ev.cloud?
Sure. Yeah. So there, as everyone knows, one of the big initiatives folks have is moving to a cloud. And one of the big blockers folks also have in organizations is the cost of migrating sometimes. So with the acquisition of Globanet came a product called Migrate. And Migrate allows and is designed for migrations into Enterprise Vault and also migrations from EV to EV Cloud. So we are making that process seamless, lower cost. So when customers do have an initiative to move from an EV on-prem to EV Cloud, please reach out to us and we'll walk you through a very simple, seamless, and low-cost way to get from your archives on-prem to a cloud-based archive.
Perfect.
All right.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time. Thank everyone for attending, for your questions. And again, like Chris mentioned, hit veritas.com, our data insights or insights section of the website. Tons of great information. And I want to thank Chris and Sam for today's session as well. And thank everyone for attending.
Thanks, Victor. Thanks, Chris. Thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah, thanks for the great questions.